Helping the girl into a chair, it wasn't a particularly large chair, but she still needed help getting into it, number 2 said, "Rather than finish the maze, Constance chose a quiet corner and sat down to have a picnic. It took Milligan some time to find her." "I'm not apologizing," Constance said. "Nor were you asked to," replied Mr. Benedict. "I'm pleased to hear you've had supper. Did you enjoy your picnic, then? Have quite enough to eat?" "Quite," said Constance. "Very well. Thank you, Milligan." With a nod, the unhappy man pulled his hat down over his eyes and withdrew from the study. Number 2, meanwhile, took up her position next to Mr. Benedict, who, after introducing Constance to the other children, she gave them all such crabby looks that no one offered to shake her hand, at last began to explain. "My young friends," he said, his face growing solemn, "let me cut to the chase. I wish I could tell you that, having passed these tests, you are now to enter into a pleasant period of education. On the contrary, what I have to tell you is extremely unpleasant indeed." The children frowned in puzzlement. Was he joking? He certainly seemed serious. Perhaps this, too, was a test, a way of gauging their commitment. "For years now," Mr. Benedict went on, "I have conducted these tests in hopes of forming a team of children to help me on an urgent project. You may be aware that some years ago Rhonda took the tests, as did number 2. In fact, a great many children have taken these tests, and yet I have been unable to form a team. Why is this? For one thing, very few children pass. For another, those who have passed have not done so at the same time. And this, you see, is crucial. I do not simply need a team. I need a team of children. Yet children do not remain children for long, and herein has lain the difficulty. Rhonda was a child only a few years ago, and number 2 a few years before that, but as you see, they are quite grown up. They have stayed on with me as assistants, and indeed their prodigious gifts have helped me tremendously. But, like myself, they cannot form a part of the team." So far, Mr. Benedict had said nothing that struck Rainey as particularly unpleasant. If anything, he had begun to feel even more proud of himself and of his new friends for having done something unusual. It was obvious that Mr. Benedict believed they had what it took to form this special team, but already he sensed that Mr. Benedict did not speak lightly. If he promised something unpleasant, Rainey was sure that something unpleasant would come. Next to him, Sticky was squirming uncomfortably, apparently thinking the same thing, and Kate had just glanced in Rainey's direction, seen the uncertainty in his eye, and nodded her silent agreement. The bad news was coming. "I see you are wondering where the unpleasantness comes in," said Mr. Benedict. "As well you might. Let me tell you, then. The project is dangerous. It is a mission, one that may put your lives at risk." The children all straightened in their chairs. "I want to make some things perfectly clear," said Mr. Benedict. "It is not my wish to put you in harm's way. Quite the opposite. I despise the notion. Children should spend their time learning and playing in absolute safety. That is my firm belief. Now then, assuming that I am telling the truth, can you guess why I would nonetheless involve you in something dangerous?" "Why should we assume that you're telling the truth?" challenged Constance. "For the sake of discussion," said Mr. Benedict, "let us assume that I am." "If you're telling the truth," said Rainey, "then the only reason you would put us in danger is that you believe we'll fall into greater danger if you don't." Mr. Benedict tapped his lumpy nose and pointed at Rainey. "Precisely, and I do believe this. I am certain, in fact, that you and a great many other people are in danger even as we speak, and that this danger shall only increase. Sticky coughed and mumbled something about needing to use the bathroom. Mr. Benedict smiled kindly down at him and said, "Sticky, never fear. You aren't compelled to join the team. I hope to explain a bit more about it, and then you'll be given the choice to stay or go. Fair enough?" After a moment's hesitation, Sticky nodded, and then Mr. Benedict added, "Now, do you truly need to use the bathroom, or can you wait a few minutes longer?" Sticky truly did, but he said, "I can wait." "Very well. Now, in the interest of further explanation, I'll ask you all another question. What is it the four of you have in common? Can you tell me?"
"We all passed your boring tests,"
said Constance.
"We're all gifted,"
said Kate.
"We're all children,"
said Sticky. Mr. Benedict nodded at each response, then looked at Rainey, who said, "We're all alone?" Mr. Benedict raised his eyebrows. "What makes you think that?" "For one thing," said Rainey, "the newspaper advertisement wasn't addressed to parents, but to children, which makes me think you were looking for kids who might be alone. And then, at the first test, there were a lot of parents, but later in the Monk building, I saw only a handful of them waiting. And I knew at least a few kids showed up all by themselves, and now here we are. I'm an orphan, and Kate's mother died when she was a baby, and then her father left her, and I'm only guessing about Constance. But as for Sticky, well, I'm sorry, Sticky, but I think you've been hiding something. I think somehow you're alone, too." "Before you say anything," said Mr. Benedict to Sticky, who was staring at Rainey with a shocked expression, "let me tell you this. I have always had a strict policy against taking on runaways. In light of the circumstances, however, I'm willing to make an exception. When it's time for you to decide about staying or leaving, please keep in mind it won't be necessary to make up stories. And if you decide to leave, Rhonda and Number 2 will offer you assistance. I have no intention of letting you go out into the city again with no money, food, or shelter."